They thought she was invisible. Just another quiet black woman trying to survive a 9 to 5, where respect was optional and cruelty was entertainment. They laughed at her. They talked over her. They made jokes they thought would never come back to haunt them. What they didn't know was this. The real boss was already in the building, and every word they said was about to cost them everything. By the time the truth came out, jobs were lost, reputations were destroyed. And the people who mocked her realized too late. You don't disrespect someone when you don't know who they really are. Stay with me, because this didn't end loud. It ended permanent. I never thought I'd see the day when silence in an office would feel louder than laughter. One moment everyone was joking, snickering, rolling their eyes like they owned the place. And the next moment, nobody could even breathe, because the woman they mocked, the woman they talked down to, the woman they treated like she didn't belong was standing just a few feet away. As the truth finally walked through the door, this isn't just a story about disrespect. This is a story about power, about people who think titles make them untouchable, and how fast confidence disappears when the real boss shows up. They thought they were humiliating a nobody. What they didn't know, they were humiliating themselves. And by the time this day ended, careers were gone. Reputations were destroyed. And one workplace learned a lesson they'll never forget. Let me tell you exactly how it happened. I still remember the way the room felt that morning. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. I walked into that office like I always did, head straight, shoulders calm, mind focused on work. I wasn't there to make friends. I wasn't there to beg for respect. I was there to do my job and go home. But from the second I stepped inside, I could feel eyes on me, whispers, smirks, that quiet little laugh. People think you don't hear this wasn't a bad neighborhood job. This was a clean corporate office. Glass walls. Open desks. Company slogans about respect and teamwork plastered everywhere. The kind of place that loves diversity on posters, but hates it in real life. I took my seat, logged in, and got to work. That's when it started. One of them walked by my desk, pretending to trip. Next thing I know, cold splash hits my arm. Soda, sticky, sweet, dripping down my sleeve. The office went silent for half a second. Then laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not awkward laughter. Real laughter. Grown adults. Managers included. Laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd seen all week. "Oh, my bad," one of them said, barely holding it together. "Just a prank." A prank. I looked down at my arm, then back up at them. Nobody apologized. Nobody helped. Nobody even looked uncomfortable. One manager shook his head, smiling like I was supposed to laugh too. "Relax," he said. "Don't be so sensitive." That's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a joke. This was a test. They wanted to see if I'd snap, if I'd cry, if I'd walk out. Because in their minds, I was just another black woman who should be grateful to even be there. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the real boss was already on his way up, and the next few minutes were about to change every single life in that room. By the next morning, the energy at work had shifted. Not because anyone apologized, but because people felt something was coming. The same coworkers who laughed yesterday suddenly couldn't look me in the eye. Conversations stopped when I walked past. Whispers followed me down the hallway. I could hear my name. I could feel the judgment. One of them leaned over another desk and said, "Watch how she acts now. Probably gonna complain." Another laughed and replied, "She'd better stay quiet. HR won't save her." I stayed quiet. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't need to explain myself to people who thought they owned the room. At lunch, the same guy who threw the soda sat across from me like nothing happened. He smirked and said, "No hard feelings, right? Just jokes around here." I looked at him, calm, steady, and said nothing. That silence bothered him more than any argument ever could. Later that afternoon, the manager pulled me aside. Not to check on me. Not to ask if I was okay. He said, "Look, if you can't handle the culture here, maybe this job isn't for you." That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about one prank. This was about power. They thought I was small, replaceable, invisible, they thought. I didn't belong in that building. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just there to work. I was there because I was watching, listening, learning how people show their true colors when they think no one important is around. By the end of the day, the office buzzed with a strange rumor. Someone important was visiting tomorrow. Very important. Managers were suddenly stressed. Emails went out about dress code. Desks were cleaned. Attitudes changed overnight. People who ignored me yesterday suddenly smiled today. Too late. Because while they were worried about impressing the real boss, they had no idea who had already seen everything, and tomorrow, they were going to find out. By lunchtime, the whole floor felt different. People weren't joking anymore. They weren't laughing as loud, because rumors move fast in offices. And this one had weight. Someone whispered that HR had suddenly blocked access to employee files. Another said the executive conference room was booked for an unscheduled visit. No agenda. No explanation. I stayed at my desk, head down, calm, quiet. That's the thing they never understand. When you grow up being underestimated, silence becomes your armor. Then it happened. The elevator's dead, not the regular one. The private executive elevator. Every head turned. Out walked a man in a tailored suit. Calm walk, sharp eyes, no badge. Behind him, two senior directors I'd never seen in person before. The entire floor froze. You could feel it. That shift when power enters the room. The same co-workers who mocked me earlier suddenly sat straight. Smiles got tight. Voices dropped. The man stopped right in the middle of the floor, looked around slowly. Then his eyes landed on me. And for the first time that day, someone smiled at me with respect. He walked straight over, not to the managers, not to HR. To me. "Are you all right?" he asked. Dead silence. My manager's face drained of color. I stood up slowly. "I am," I said. "But I don't think this workplace is—" That's when people realized this wasn't a random visit. This was a reckoning, and it was just getting started. By now, the whole office had picked a side, and it wasn't hers. Word spread fast. Not because she made a mistake, but because people wanted her to fail. Emails stopped including her. Meetings happened without her. Her chair was accidentally moved from the conference table to the corner, like she didn't belong there anymore. One afternoon, as she walked past the break room, she heard it laughter, not quiet laughter, the kind that's meant to be heard. One of the employees held up his phone, showing a slow-motion replay of the soda hitting her blouse earlier that week. Someone had edited it with music. Someone else added a caption. "Oops, wrong target." They all laughed. She froze for half a second. Not because she was weak, but because this was the moment she realized something important. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was culture. She stepped into the room. The laughter didn't stop right away. A few people noticed her and tried to play innocent, but it was too late. The damage was already done. She looked at the phone, then at their faces. Calm. To calm. "I hope you're enjoying yourselves," she said quietly. One guy smirked. "Relax. It's just office humor," another added. "If you can't take a joke, maybe this isn't the place for you." That line landed heavy because it wasn't about soda. It wasn't about jokes. It was about power. She nodded slowly. "You're right," she said. "This place isn't what I thought it was. They thought they won." She walked out without another word, head high, hands steady. Behind her, the jokes started again. They had no idea what. They'd just triggered. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the real boss wasn't offended. She was paying attention, and the reckoning was already on its way. By this point, the whole office felt different. The laughter had died down, but not because anyone felt guilty. It stopped because people started realizing something wasn't adding up. The woman they had mocked wasn't reacting the way a victim was supposed to. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She stood there calm. To calm, one of the supervisors leaned back in his chair and said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear. Why are you still standing there? You got something else to prove?" She looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'm just waiting." That word hit different. Waiting for what? Another employee laughed nervously and whispered, "Waiting for security, maybe?" Someone else joked, "Or waiting for her ride." But the manager's smile started to crack, because right then, the front doors opened. Not fast. Not dramatic slow, heavy. The kind of entrance that doesn't ask for attention, takes it. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Chairs stopped rolling. Phones froze in people's hands. A man walked in wearing a tailored suit, calm expression, sharp eyes. Not flashy. Not loud, but everyone in that building knew exactly who he was, the real boss, the owner, the same man whose name was on every paycheck. The manager jumped up so fast his chair slammed into the wall. "Sir, I didn't know you were coming in today." The owner didn't look at him. Not yet. His eyes went straight to the woman standing in the middle of the office. The same woman they had laughed at. The same woman with soda stains on her clothes. His face changed instantly. Not anger, first pain, then something colder. He walked past every desk, past every frozen employee, until he stood right next to her, and then he did something that made every single person's stomach drop. He gently took off his suit jacket and placed it around her shoulders. The room went silent. No laughter. No whispers, just breathing. The owner turned to the manager and said, calm but deadly, "Can you explain why my wife is standing here soaked in soda? While your staff is laughing?" That's when reality hit. Not slowly. All at once, faces turned pale. Knees went weak. Someone dropped their phone because in that moment, everyone understood the truth. They didn't prank an employee. They humiliated the boss's wife. And the consequences were just... By the time lunch hour hit, the whole building felt different. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just... tense. People were whispering instead of laughing now. Eyes kept drifting toward the glass office upstairs. Because word had spread fast, the woman they clowned that morning, she hadn't left. She was sitting calmly in a conference room with HR, legal, and two executives nobody recognized. No tears, no anger, just quiet confidence, and that scared them more than yelling ever could. I watched the same co-workers who spilled soda on her suddenly acting polite. Too polite. Fake smiles, over-apologizing, offering coffee like it erased disrespect. One of them leaned over to me and whispered, "Yo, you think she's suing?" I didn't answer, because at that moment, the elevator dinged, and everything stopped. Out walked a man in a tailored suit. No badge, no visitor sticker. But security snapped to attention the second they saw him. This wasn't middle management. This wasn't corporate HR. This was ownership energy. He didn't rush, didn't smile, didn't look confused. He walked straight past the front desk like he owned the floor. Because he did. And when he reached the conference room, the woman stood up. Her posture changed. Not scared. Not defensive, comfortable like she'd been waiting for him. The room went silent as he looked around at the staff. At the spilled soda still faintly sticky on the carpet. At the employees suddenly pretending to work. Then he placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said, calm as hell, "Is this the team you were telling me about?" That's when it hit everyone at once. This wasn't some random employee. This wasn't a lawsuit threat. This was personal. And the people who thought it was a joke that morning, they were about to learn the hard way that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just walks in and lets the room expose itself. By this point, the whole office vibe had flipped. What started as jokes turned into silence. The same coworkers who were laughing earlier were now glued to their screens, pretending to work.
Ow.
Nobody wanted eye contact. Nobody wanted to be seen on the wrong side of this. And that's when upper management showed up. Two executives walked in with tablets in their hands, serious faces, no smiles. HR badges visible. That alone told me this wasn't a small issue anymore. One of them looked straight at the group and said, "We've reviewed the security footage. You could feel the air get heavy. They pulled up the video on the conference room screen, clear as day, the soda being thrown. Laughing, the phones recording, the whispers, the comments, no edits, no excuses. The woman who threw the soda tried to speak. Her voice cracked. It was just a joke. Everyone was laughing. One executive cut her off instantly. Jokes don't require HR investigations. Then they turned to the others. Anyone who recorded or encouraged this stand-up? Nobody moved. Then one person stood, then another, then another. You could see the regret hit them in real time. This wasn't about being embarrassed anymore. This was about jobs, careers, reputations. The manager who allowed all this tried to distance himself. I wasn't aware HR didn't even let him finish. We're tagged in the internal chat, so when his face went pale, because now it was official. This wasn't just bullying. This was negligence, discrimination, and company liability. And the worst part, they still didn't know who she really was. They thought this was damage control. They had no idea what was about to hit them next. By the next morning, the office felt different. Quieter, heavier. People walked slower. Conversations dropped the moment I passed by. HR was already in crisis mode. Legal teams were scrambling. Emails were flying back and forth like panic smoke. That prank video never went away. Someone had reposted it on LinkedIn, then Twitter, then TikTok. Millions of views, and the comments weren't kind. Fire everyone. This company is rotten. Disgusting behavior. Boycott them. Sponsors started pulling out. One major client paused a contract worth millions. Another demanded an internal investigation within 48 hours. The same managers who laughed the loudest yesterday were now pretending they barely knew me. One of them stopped me near the elevator. Hey, listen, that was just a misunderstanding. I looked at him calmly. You threw soda on a woman at work and laughed. It's not a misunderstanding. His face went pale. By lunch, 3 employees were sent home pending review. By evening, 2 executives resigned for personal reasons. Still, they thought they could contain it. They thought the damage was already done. They had no idea what was about to walk through the front door the next morning. Because this wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was about ownership, power, and who really signed the checks? And tomorrow, they were going to find out. By now, the whole office felt different. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody was whispering jokes. Every single person could feel it. The energy flipped. HR was standing stiff. The department head wouldn't even make eye contact. The same employees who had mocked her were suddenly quiet, pale, desperate. That's when the real boss spoke again. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He calmly asked one question that froze the room. Does anyone here want to explain why my wife was treated like a problem instead of a professional? Silence. You could hear the AC hum. You could hear someone swallow hard. Then one manager tried to save himself. He stuttered, blamed office culture, blamed jokes, blamed misunderstandings. Said it was all harmless. The boss turned to him slowly. Harmless, he said. You threw a drink at her. You laughed. You let others join in. He paused. And you did it because you thought she had no power. That hit harder than any shout. One by one, faces dropped. People realized this wasn't about one prank anymore. This was about character. This was about who they were when they thought nobody important was watching. The boss pulled out his phone. He had messages, emails, security footage, timestamps. Turns out this wasn't the first time. They'd done it before, to others who didn't fit. And now, every single move was documented. That's when the room understood something terrifying. This wasn't damage control time anymore. This was consequence time. And the ending was about to be brutal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile either. The room had gone quiet in a way that makes people uncomfortable. Not awkward quiet. Dangerous quiet. Every employee who laughed earlier was standing stiff now, eyes down, hands folded like they were waiting for a verdict. That's when the real boss finally spoke. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said my name. That alone changed everything. The manager who started all this took a step back. The same guy who threw jokes? The same guy who allowed the mocking? The same guy who looked the other way when she was humiliated? He tried to explain, tried to spin the story, said it was office culture, said it was just a prank. The boss didn't even let him finish. He asked one question. Did you protect your employee? Or did you entertain cruelty? No one answered. That was enough. The decision didn't take long. Suspensions first, then terminations. Immediate and final. Not dramatic, not loud, just permanent. The employees who laughed earlier were now watching their careers collapse in real time. The same mouths that mocked her were now silent. The same people who thought power meant permission were learning the cost of arrogance. And then came the final moment. The boss turned to her, not as a victim, not as someone who needed saving, but as someone who mattered. He apologized. Publicly, clearly, without excuses. And then he did something no one expected. He promoted her. On the spot. The manager who mocked her was escorted out. The department was restructured. Policies rewritten. Training mandated. Not for PR, not for show, for accountability. As we walked out together, no one laughed anymore. No phones were recording. No jokes were whispered. Just silence, the kind that stays with people. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's clean. Sometimes it's professional. Sometimes it's watching people realize they underestimated the wrong person. And that day, they didn't just lose their dignity. They lost their power. Full circle.